The morning started like any other. Coffee brewing, the smell of toast drifting from the kitchen. Sarah hummed a little tune as she packed lunch for the kids. I was scrolling through the news on my phone, half listening to the morning show. Our life, on the surface, was perfect. We had the house, a split-level ranch with a big backyard for the kids to run around in, the 2 cars in the driveway, and a comfortable rhythm to our days. We had built it together, piece by piece, over 15 years of marriage. Sarah, my high school sweetheart, was my rock, or so I thought. Then the mail arrived, postman's familiar footsteps on the porch, the clatter of letters through the slot. Sarah usually handled the bills, sorting them, paying them, keeping track of our finances. I trusted her completely. We had always been open about money, or at least I believed we were. We had a joint bank account, joint credit cards, and our names were both on the deed to the house. Our house, our home. Mark, can you grab the mail? Sarah called from the kitchen, her voice light and airy. I walked over, picked up the handful of envelopes. Most of it was junk mail, circulars, credit card offers. But one envelope stood out. It was thick, heavier than the others, and had the logo of a bank I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't our main bank, the one where we had our checking account and original mortgage. This one was from First National Savings and Loan. I frowned. What would they be sending us? Maybe it was some kind of promotional offer, a new credit card with a low interest rate, though we weren't looking for one. I tore it open. Inside was a formal-looking letter, dense with legal jargon and a stack of papers. My eyes scanned the first few lines, trying to make sense of it. Then I saw the words, Notice of Default, Second Mortgage, Outstanding Balance. My blood ran cold. Second mortgage, we didn't have a second mortgage. We had discussed it once years ago when we thought about putting in a pool, but we decided against it. It was too expensive, too much debt. We agreed. Always. I flipped through the pages, my heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. There were numbers, big, terrifying numbers. A principal balance of over $200,000. An overdue payment notice. And then the most chilling part, the name listed as the borrower. Sarah Miller. Not Sarah and Mark Miller. Just Sarah Murr. My hands started to tremble. This had to be a mistake. A terrible, incomprehensible error. Maybe it was for someone else with the same name, but no, the address was ours. Our house, this very house. Mark, is everything okay? Sarah's voice pulled me out of the icy shock. She had walked in holding a half-eaten piece of toast. Her brow was furrowed with concern. I couldn't speak. I just stood there clutching the papers, my eyes wide with disbelief and a growing horror. I held out the letter to her, my arm rigid. She took it, her expression shifting from concern to confusion. Her eyes darted over the page, then widened just like mine had. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. toast slipped from her fingers and landed softly on the rug. "What is this?" I finally managed to croak, my voice sounding alien, thin. She shook her head, a frantic motion. "I don't know." "I don't know what this is, Mark." But her eyes were different. They weren't just confused. There was a flicker of something else, something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Guilt? A desperate, trapped animal look. "It says second mortgage, $200,000. I pushed, my voice rising. "And my name isn't on it. It's only your name. What does this mean, Sarah?" She backed away a step, bumping into the wall. "It's a mistake, Mark. It has to be. Someone made a mistake." Her voice was tight, high-pitched. "A $200,000 mistake." I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "No bank makes that kind of mistake. Not with our house." I picked up the fallen toast, my mind racing, trying to process the impossible. How could this happen? How could she have taken out a loan of that magnitude, using our shared property without me knowing? Without my signature. This was a secret, a massive gaping hole in the foundation of our trust. The kids' laughter drifted in from the backyard. They were playing, oblivious. Their innocence felt like a cruel mockery of the nightmare unfolding in our living room. "Sarah, tell me," I pleaded. My voice breaking. "Tell me what this is. Now." Her gaze darted around the room, avoiding my eyes. She wrung her hands, a nervous habit she had when she was truly distressed. "Mark, please. Let's talk about this later. The kids will hear." "Kids will hear about what, Sarah?" "That their house is about to be foreclosed on because you took out a secret loan and now the bank wants its money?" I couldn't keep the anger, the panic from my voice. It was like a dam had broken inside me. "Don't say that," she hissed, her eyes finally locking onto mine, filled with a raw desperation. "Don't say that word. It's not like that. We'll fix it. I'll fix it. We'll fix it. I'll fix it," I repeated, incredulous. "Sarah, how could you do this? How could you put our home, our family at risk? What was this money for? Where is it?" She crumpled then, sliding down the wall, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. The sight of her so broken would normally fill me with sympathy, a desire to comfort her. But today, it just fueled a cold, hard rage. Her tears felt like a manipulative tactic, a shield against the truth I desperately needed. I stood over her, the bank letter still clutched in my hand, its crisp edges digging into my palm. The words on the page blurred, replaced by images of our life together. Our shared dreams, all of them now tainted, possibly destroyed. Trust, the absolute, unwavering trust I had in her, felt like a burning cinder in my gut. This wasn't just about money. This was about betrayal. A betrayal so profound, so secretive, that it felt like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I had loved for half my life, the mother of my children, had done something unspeakable. And now the bank wanted its money, and my name wasn't on the loan. But our house, was definitely on the line. The nightmare had just begun. Sarah's sobs filled the silence, a raw, ragged sound that tore at the edges of my frayed nerves. I stared down at her, a swirling vortex of anger, disbelief, and a terrible aching hurt. The silence stretched, punctuated only by her ragged breaths. I needed answers. I couldn't breathe until I had them. "Sarah, stop," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Look at me. Tell me. What happened?" She slowly lifted her head, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, eyes red-rimmed. She looked utterly devastated, but the sight didn't soften my resolve. Not now, not when everything we had built was crumbling around us. I don't know where to start, she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. Start with the loan, I pressed. The $200,000. How did you get it? Why did you get it? And why didn't I know about it? She swallowed hard, her gaze flickering around the room again, like a cornered animal searching for an escape. It was for something stupid, Mark. Something I tried to fix on my own. Stupid? I practically roared. $200,000 is not stupid, Sarah. It's our future. It's our children's future. What in the name of God could you have done that required that much money, that you had to hide it from me? She flinched, pulling her knees up to her chest, making herself small. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it. Handle what? My patience was wearing thin, stretched to breaking point. Handle what, Sarah? The bank is threatening to take our house. Our house, which we own together. How could they give you a loan without my knowledge? Without my signature? They said it was fine. They just needed some papers. What papers, Sarah? Did you forge my signature? The words were out before I could stop them, cold and accusatory. She recoiled as if struck. No, Mark, no, I would never do that. Her voice rose, filled with indignation. But her eyes still wouldn't meet mine, not fully. Then explain it. I flung my arm out, indicating the letter still in my hand. Explain why my name isn't on this, but our house is listed as collateral. Explain how you got this money. Explain what you spent it on. Her lower lip trembled. It was gambling. The single word hit me like a physical blow. Gambling. My mind reeled. Sarah, my Sarah, the responsible one, the one who balanced the budget, clipped coupons and lectured me about saving. It was impossible. It had to be a lie. Gambling? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. What gambling? You never go to casinos, you don't play cards. What are you talking about? Online, she whispered, burying her face in her hands again. It started small, just a few dollars here and there, then it got bigger. I thought I could win it back. I just needed one big win to fix it, to pay everything back. And then I'd stop, I swear. A cold, sick dread settled in my stomach. Online gambling. It made a twisted kind of sense. The secrecy, the desperate need for money, the addiction that could consume someone so completely. But Sarah, it was like discovering she was a completely different person. How long? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I felt numb, detached from the scene playing out in front of me. She hesitated. A few years. It got really bad in the last year or so. A few years. For years, she had been living a double life, a secret life, fueled by a destructive addiction, while I worked, oblivious, thinking we were building a future together. Every shared laugh, every quiet evening, every future plan felt like a cruel joke. $200,000, I pressed. the reality of the numbers crashing down on me again. You lost all of it? Gambling? She nodded, a pathetic, broken figure. And more. I used some of our savings too at first. That's why I needed the loan. To replace what I'd taken. And then I lost the loan money too. I kept chasing the losses, Mark. I just couldn't stop. My head spun. Savings? She had dipped into our shared savings too? How much? How deep did this rabbit hole go? So, you took the original loan out to cover up the money you lost from our savings. And then you lost the loan money too? I summarized, trying to keep my voice steady, though my insides were churning. She nodded again, tears silently streaming down her face. And you forged my signature to get that loan? I asked again, watching her carefully. This was the critical part. She finally looked me in the eye, her own eyes pleading. Number, I didn't forge your signature. I said I was recently divorced, that the house was part of the settlement, that it was solely mine now. My jaw dropped. That was a lie. A bold-faced, calculated lie to the bank. A different kind of betrayal, but betrayal nonetheless. It was almost worse than forgery. It implied a level of premeditation, of deception, that chilled me to the bone. You told them we were divorced? I whispered, the words catching in my throat. To get a loan on our house? Our shared asset? She couldn't meet my gaze after that. I know it was wrong, Mark, so wrong. I was desperate. I was so deep in debt and I kept thinking I could win it back. I kept telling myself it was just a temporary fix. I didn't want to lose our home. I just made everything worse. But she had lost our home, or at least put it in extreme jeopardy. The bank letter was proof. They wanted their money, and I wasn't on the loan, which meant in their eyes I had no obligation to pay it. But it was still our house, my kids' home. Did anyone at the bank question it? I asked, trying to grasp the mechanics of this insane deception. Did they ask for divorce papers? Proof of sole ownership? She shook her head. Number, not really. I guess they didn't do their due diligence. I just signed the papers. It was all online at first. Then they sent a notary to the house. I made sure you weren't home. A notary came to our house while I was at work. While she was plotting to take out a secret loan, gambling away our future. The sheer audacity, the cold calculation of it took my breath away. It wasn't a mistake. It was a carefully constructed deception. So you lied. Completely fabricated a story about our divorce. And then the bank just handed you $200,000 based on that. I asked, my voice flat, hollow. The absurdity of it was almost comical if it wasn't so tragic. They didn't ask for much proof, she insisted. They just looked at the deed, I guess. My name was on it, so they assumed I could pledge it. But our names were both on the deed. That's what confused me. How could they bypass my ownership? This smelled rotten, not just on her part, but on the bank's as well. The kids' voices from outside grew louder. Dad, can we have popsicles? The innocent question was like a splash of cold water. Our children, they depended on us. On this home. I looked at Sarah, crumpled on the floor, weeping. My wife. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone. She was a stranger. A liar. An addict. And she had gambled away everything. Our house. Our security. Our trust. Our future. It was all gone or teetering on the edge. Pain in my chest was so sharp, I thought I might physically split in two. This wasn't just heartbreaking, it was soul-crushing. The next morning, David arrived before the kids woke up. He found me nursing a cold cup of coffee. The bank papers spread out like a battle map on the kitchen table. Sarah was still on the couch, I assumed, asleep, or simply inert. I hadn't checked. "Morning, Mark," he said, his voice soft, as if not to disturb the fragile peace. He poured himself a coffee, then sat opposite me, his gaze sweeping over the documents. "Okay, let's go through this. What's the plan?" "First, call the lawyer Ken," I said, pointing to the number David had texted. "Then I need to talk to the bank. I need to understand how this loan was even approved. If they were negligent, maybe that gives us leverage." "Good. But remember, anything you say to the bank could be used against you. Let Ken advise you before you make any official statements or admissions," David cautioned. I nodded. Ken, the lawyer, was surprisingly accessible. I explained the situation, trying to keep my emotions in check, sticking to the facts. He listened patiently, asking sharp, pertinent questions. "So, your name is on the deed as a joint tenant. Her name is on the loan as the sole borrower, pledging the entire property as collateral. And she confessed to lying about her marital status to the bank," Ken summarized. "Yes, that's right. This is complicated, Mark," Ken said, his voice grave. "On one hand, you are not a party to the loan agreement, so you are not personally liable for the debt. That's good. On the other hand, the bank did record a lien against the property. If your wife lied to them, that could constitute fraud. And if the bank failed to properly verify ownership or marital status, that's negligence on their part. The question is, how negligent were they? And how much did your wife's deception play into it?" He explained that banks typically perform a title search to confirm ownership. If the title search showed both our names, it would be a major red flag if only one borrower was listed, especially for a second mortgage. If they bypassed that or somehow missed it, or just took her word for it, that strengthens your case, Ken continued. "But we need to see the actual loan documents, every page. That will tell us exactly what she signed, what she claimed, and what the bank's procedures were. He advised me not to make any payments on the loan, even if the bank pressured me. He said to inform the bank in writing, through him, that I disputed the validity of the loan as it pertains to my ownership interest. And the bank will probably tell you they followed all procedures, that your wife represented herself as the sole owner, and that you are still liable," Ken warned. "They'll try to strong-arm you. Don't fall for it. Let me handle them." Armed with Ken's advice, I decided I had to go to the bank in person. I couldn't wait for letters or phone calls. I needed to see those documents myself. I left David to watch the kids, who were still thankfully unaware of the cataclysm that had struck. Sarah was still on the couch, though she seemed to be awake now. I avoided eye contact as I grabbed my keys. The First National Savings and Loan branch was on the other side of town. The building was sleek, modern, all glass and steel. It felt ironically pristine compared to the mess my life had become. I walked up to the reception desk, stated my name, and explained I was there about a recent letter concerning an outstanding loan on my property. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "I am sorry, sir, but we can't discuss account details with anyone not listed on the loan," she said, her voice polite but firm. "My name is on the deed for the property," I explained, pulling out a copy of the deed I had brought. "And it's listed as collateral for this loan, so yes, you can discuss it with me. I need to see the loan documents, all of them." She hesitated, then reluctantly led me to a small enclosed office. A man with a stern face and a dark suit sat behind a large desk. He introduced himself as Mr. Harrison, the branch manager. I laid out my case calmly, concisely. The letter, my name on the deed, her name only on the loan, her admission of lying about marital status. Mr. Harrison listened, his expression unchanging. When I finished, he cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, I understand your concern. However, our records show that Mrs. Miller applied for and was granted a second mortgage, based on her representation as the sole owner of the property. All standard procedures were followed. Standard procedures? I scoffed. Did your standard procedures involve a title search? Because if they did, you would have seen my name. You would have seen that the property is jointly owned. How could you grant a loan pledging a jointly owned asset to a single borrower without the consent or even knowledge of the other owner? He fidgeted slightly. Mrs. Miller presented documents that led us to believe she was the sole owner. What documents? I pushed. Did she present a forged divorce decree? Because we're not divorced, we are married still. As of this morning. Paused, then said, I cannot disclose the specifics of the application process due to client confidentiality. Client confidentiality, my voice rose. She defrauded you and she jeopardized my home. I am an owner of that property. I demand to see the loan documents. I have a right to know what my wife signed and how you failed to verify her claims. He steepled his fingers. I can provide you with a copy of the recorded lien, but the full loan application and supporting documents contain Mrs. Miller's personal information. We can't release those without her consent or a court order. This was a roadblock. I needed those documents to prove negligence. I pulled out my phone and called Ken. I explained the situation to him on speaker. Mr. Harrison, this is Ken Roberts, Mr. Miller's attorney. Ken's voice boomed through the phone. You are currently refusing to provide documents that directly impact my client's property rights. My client is a co-owner of the collateral. Your bank's failure to perform proper due diligence, assuming this loan was granted without his knowledge or proper consent, could constitute a serious legal liability for your institution. I will be sending you an official request for these documents, along with a notice of dispute regarding the validity of this lien, as it applies to Mr. Miller's interest in the property. I strongly advise you to cooperate, to avoid further legal action. Mr. Harrison looked distinctly uncomfortable. We will review your request, Mr. Roberts. You will provide those documents, Mr. Harrison, or we will proceed with discovery. Understand? Ken's voice was firm, unyielding. I hung up, feeling a small surge of grim satisfaction. At least Ken was on my side. But the stonewalling confirmed my suspicions. The bank was hiding something, or at least trying to protect themselves. They knew they had messed up. I left the bank with only the copy of the recorded lien, which confirmed the debt and the property as collateral. It listed Sarah Miller as the mortgagor. No mention of me. It stated the loan was signed and dated roughly 18 months prior. 18 months. For 18 months, this secret debt had been hanging over our heads, accruing interest, while I went about my life completely unaware. The level of deception, the calculated secrecy, it was overwhelming. The woman I married, the woman who shared my bed, had systematically undermined our financial stability and betrayed our trust on a scale I couldn't have imagined. I knew now that my relationship with Sarah, as I understood it, was a complete fabrication. The layers of lies were deeper, more pervasive than I had ever dared to imagine. The visit to the bank, while frustrating, had a chilling clarity to it. The bank was definitely stonewalling. That meant they either knew they messed up badly, or they were protecting Sarah, which seemed unlikely, unless she had somehow manipulated them too. Ken assured me that, with a formal request and the threat of legal action, they would eventually have to turn over the loan documents. But that would take time. Time we didn't have, with the bank already sending default notices. I returned home, the tension in the house palpable. Sarah was still in the living room, curled up on the couch, looking utterly drained. David was in the kitchen, making lunch for the kids, who were still thankfully unaware, lost in their own world of cartoons and toys. "Any luck?" David asked, sensing my mood. I shook my head. "They wouldn't give me the full documents. Claimed client confidentiality. But Ken's going to push them." It confirmed my suspicion, though. They were negligent. Or Sarah was incredibly clever with her lies. So what's next? "I need to understand what happened to the money," I said, looking towards the living room. She said gambling, but $200,000 in gambling losses? That's extreme. I need to know where she did this. How often, the full extent of it. David sighed. "Mark, maybe you should focus on the house first. The money is gone. You are not getting it back. What you need to figure out is how to protect your asset." "I know, but I can't move forward until I understand the depth of this hole she dug. It's not just the money, it's the trust. It's knowing who she really is." I walked into the living room feeling a cold resolve. Sarah looked up, her eyes puffy and red. "I went to the bank," I stated, my voice flat. "They wouldn't give me the loan documents without your consent, or a court order. But I know they approved a loan for $200,000, based on your claim that you were the sole owner of this house, which is a lie." She winced, turning her head away. "I told you I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do." "Desperate for what, Sarah?" I pressed. "You said gambling. Where? What kind? Give me details. I need to understand what you've done." She hesitated, then began to speak, her voice low and broken, like pieces of glass grinding against each other. "It started with those online casino ads. You know, the ones that pop up on social media. I was bored one night just browsing and I saw one. Free spins. I thought, what's the harm? Just a few dollars. It was fun at first. A little thrill. I won a few times small amounts. That hooked me." She paused, taking a ragged breath. "Then I started losing, and I'd chase the losses. I always thought if I just played a little longer, bet a little more, I'd hit that big jackpot that would make it all back. I started staying up late after you fell asleep, or getting up early before you woke up. I'd use my phone or my old laptop. I had a separate credit card too that you didn't know about. I got it years ago for emergencies, but then it became for this. And when that maxed out, I used money from our savings. I'd transfer it to a separate account, then funnel it to the sites." My stomach clenched. A separate credit card. Separate account. The layers of secrecy were sickening. "How much, Sarah? How much did you lose, truly?" She finally met my eyes, and the raw shame and pain there were almost unbearable. "Almost 400,000, Mark, including the second mortgage money. The 200,000 from the loan, and then another 150,000 or so from our savings, and then what I put on that credit card, which was probably another 50,000. $400,000. My head reeled. It wasn't just the 200,000 from the loan. It was double that. It was our entire life savings, our retirement, our kids' college funds, all gone, flushed down a digital drain. The sheer magnitude of the loss was staggering. $400,000, I repeated hollowly. Our entire savings. Gone on online slots and poker? She nodded, tears streaming again. I couldn't stop. It's like a sickness, Mark. Every time I lost, I'd feel sick to my stomach. But then I'd get this rush, this belief that the next spin, the next hand, would be the one, and it never was. It was always more. More money, more debt. I tried to stop so many times. I deleted the apps, I blocked the sites. But I'd always find a new one, The ads, they pop up everywhere. And they make it so easy to sign up to deposit more. She was describing a classic addiction spiral. The desperate hope, the chasing of losses, the ever-escalating bets. I felt a surge of something akin to pity, quickly overshadowed by anger. She might be sick, but her sickness had devastated us. So you spent years doing this secretly? Behind my back, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Lying to me every single day, draining our future. And when you ran out of our money, you took out a fraudulent loan on our house to cover it up. And then you lost that too. She was sobbing uncontrollably now. I am so sorry, Mark. I am so sorry. I know I destroyed everything. I just didn't know how to tell you. I was so ashamed. I thought if I won, I could just put it all back, and you'd never have to know. But I did know. And the knowing was worse than any financial loss. It was the shattering of a shared reality, the destruction of a bond built on trust and honesty. Person I loved, the one I relied on, had been a stranger, a ghost, living a secret life of lies and addiction. Where is this credit card now? I asked, my voice still flat. She pointed to her purse, slumped on the floor next to her. I opened it. There it was, a Visa card. Not from any bank we regularly used. I pulled out my phone and called the number on the back. It was maxed out, $50,000. The total debt was even higher than she'd first let on. I felt a dizzying sense of freefall. Our future, our security, our shared life, all obliterated by this hidden, insidious addiction. It wasn't just the house anymore. It was the entire financial structure of our lives. We were utterly, completely bankrupt. And she had done it all. Kids suddenly burst into the living room, their faces bright with innocent joy. Mommy, Daddy, can we play a board game? Our daughter asked, holding up a box of Candyland. Sarah flinched, quickly wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself. I looked at our children, their sweet, trusting faces. How could I protect them from this? How could I explain that their home, their sense of security, had been gambled away by their own mother? The secret life she had lived, the one where she gambled away everything, had now collided with our reality, and the wreckage was everywhere. My marriage was dead. Our finances were in ruin, and the fight to keep a roof over our children's heads was just beginning. It was a heartbreaking realization that the woman I loved was a stranger, and her addiction had stolen our entire future. The days that followed Sarah's full confession were a blur of coldness and despair. Odd house, once a sanctuary of warmth and laughter, became a mausoleum of unspoken grief and tension. Sarah drifted through the days like a ghost, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She tried to approach me, to apologize, to touch my arm, but I recoiled every time. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. I slept in the guest room. The thought of sharing a bed with her, knowing the depths of her deception, was unbearable. Our children, bless their innocent hearts, seemed to sense the shift. They were quieter, less boisterous. They'd ask, "Are you and Mommy mad?" And I'd offer some mumbled, evasive answer about grown-up problems. The lies were continuing, but this time they were to protect our kids. My main focus became the legal battle. Ken, my lawyer, was already making moves. He sent a formal demand to First National Savings and Loan for all loan documents, warning them of potential legal action if they continued to stonewall. He also sent a notice of dispute, stating that I, as a joint owner, did not consent to the second mortgage and that the bank had failed in its duty of care. The bank, as predicted, pushed back. Their initial response was a terse letter, stating they had followed all procedures and that Sarah Miller had represented herself as the sole owner. They even implied that I might have been complicit or negligent in allowing her to do so. That infuriated me. I had been working, providing, trusting. She had been lying, stealing, gambling. They're trying to shift the blame, Mark, Ken explained over the phone. Standard. But the fact that both your names are on the deed and they didn't get your signature or verify her claim of sole ownership is a huge weak point for them. We will get those documents. And we will go after them if necessary. He explained the potential legal strategies. We could sue the bank for negligence and fraud, arguing that the lien against my share of the property was invalid. This would be a long, arduous, and expensive battle. Alternatively, we could try to negotiate a settlement, perhaps getting them to release the lien or significantly reduce the principal. Though that was a long shot given the amount involved. The most terrifying option was the bank proceeding with foreclosure. If the loan went into full default, they could start the process of seizing the house. Even if the loan was technically only in Sarah's name, their lien was still against the property, which meant our home was still on the chopping block. Meanwhile, the reality of our financial situation weighed heavily. $400,000. Gone. Our savings account was practically empty. The secret credit card was maxed out. Our regular joint checking account, which paid for our daily expenses and original mortgage, was still active, but it was just a few paychecks away from drying up completely. I called a few debt consolidation services, but they laughed when I told them the amount. That's not debt consolidation, sir. That's bankruptcy, one operator said kindly. Bankruptcy. The word echoed in my mind. The ultimate financial defeat. But it felt like the only path. One evening I couldn't take the silence anymore. The kids were asleep. Sarah was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the television, which was off. We need to talk about this, I said, standing in the doorway. She flinched, then slowly turned her head. What's there to talk about, Mark? I told you everything. I ruined us. She here has nothing left to say. T here has everything to say, I countered, my voice tight. What are you going to do about your gambling addiction? Are you going to get help? She looked away. I don't know. I am so ashamed. I don't even know where to start. You start by admitting you have a problem, which you've done, I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. Then you find a support group, a therapist, something. You can't just sit here and do nothing while our lives fall apart. She shrugged. What difference does it make? The money's gone. The house is probably gone too. What's left? Her defeatism infuriated me. What's left? Our children are left. Their future is left. Their home is left if I can somehow fight to save it. You did this, Sarah, and I am fighting for our kids. What are you going to do? She started to cry again, silent tears rolling down her face. I don't know. I can't think. I just want to disappear. You can't disappear, I said, my voice hardening. You have to face this. You have to get help. And you have to cooperate with whatever I need to do to save our home. If we go to court, you might have to testify. You might have to tell the truth about what you did and how the bank acted. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. Testify? In court? For fraud? Will I go to jail? The thought had crossed my mind. Fraud was a serious crime. But my primary concern was the house, not putting my wife in prison. I don't know, Sarah. I am not a lawyer. But if you lied to the bank to get a loan, it's a possibility. That's why you need to cooperate. The more honest you are, the better for everyone. This conversation was a breaking point. I realized Sarah was completely overwhelmed, consumed by guilt and shame, and essentially paralyzed. I couldn't rely on her for anything, except perhaps her truthful testimony if it came to that. I was truly on my own in this fight. The next day, a registered letter arrived from First National Savings and Loan. It was a formal notice of intent to foreclose. They were giving us 90 days to cure the default, which meant paying the overdue amount plus significant penalties, or they would initiate foreclosure proceedings. 90 days. $200,000. It felt like an impossible mountain to climb. The legal battle with the bank would take months, maybe even years. Foreclosure was a terrifyingly immediate threat. I looked at the letter, then at the house around me. This was it. The full, devastating impact of Sarah's secret life. The fallout was here, crashing down on us like a tidal wave. My heart was broken, yes, but now it was also filled with a cold, desperate resolve. I had to fight, for my kids, for whatever shred of our future I could salvage. The battle lines were drawn. The 90-day clock started ticking with the arrival of the notice of intent to foreclose. It was a constant drumming reminder of the ticking time bomb under our feet. Every day that passed brought us closer to losing our home. Ken, my lawyer, wasted no time. He filed a lawsuit against First National Savings and Loan, alleging negligence, fraudulent lending practices, and seeking to have the lien on my half of the property declared invalid. He also filed a motion for an injunction to halt the foreclosure proceedings until our lawsuit against the bank could be heard. This was our best hope, but court proceedings moved slowly. Meanwhile, life at home was a suffocating silence. Sarah was still withdrawn, barely speaking. I suggested therapy, individual and family. She reluctantly agreed to a few sessions with a therapist specializing in addiction, but she mostly just sat there numb. Our children felt the chill. They started spending more time at friends' houses, escaping the heavy atmosphere. I couldn't blame them. My own stress levels were through the roof. I barely slept. My mind raced constantly, replaying the lies, calculating numbers, imagining the worst-case scenarios. The thought of losing the house, of uprooting my children, of explaining to them why they no longer had a home, was a torment. One afternoon, Ken called. "Good news, Mark. The judge granted the injunction. The foreclosure proceedings are temporarily stayed until our lawsuit is heard." A wave of immense relief washed over me. It wasn't a victory, not by a long shot, but it bought us time. Time to fight. Time to breathe. "That's great, Ken. What happens now?" "Now we enter the discovery phase. We'll formally request all their documents related to this loan, deposition their employees, and they'll do the same to you and Sarah. This is where we expose their negligence." The discovery phase was as intrusive as it sounded. I had to gather every financial document I possessed, provide statements, and eventually sit for a deposition. Sarah, too, was served with a notice for deposition. The idea terrified her. "I can't do it, Mark," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I can't sit there and have them question me about everything, about the gambling, about the lies. I am too ashamed. You have to, Sarah, I told her, my voice firm. This is the only way. Ken says your honest testimony is crucial. If you don't cooperate, the judge might lift the injunction, and we're back to square one with foreclosure. Your testimony could prove the bank was negligent and that you lied to them, which helps my case for invalidating the loan against my interest. She finally agreed, a defeated slump to her shoulders. Ken prepared us both for our depositions. For Sarah, it was particularly brutal. The bank's lawyers were relentless, probing every detail of her addiction, her lies, the money, the secret credit card. She broke down several times during her deposition. But she answered honestly, her voice barely audible. She admitted to lying to the loan officer about her marital status, about being the sole owner. She admitted to fabricating documents that made it seem like the house was hers exclusively after a supposed divorce. She admitted the gambling. It was agonizing to watch, but it was also a necessary step. My deposition was less dramatic but equally exhausting. I had to recount my complete ignorance of the loan, my trust in Sarah, the discovery of the letter, and the shock of her confession. I presented all my financial records, showing that I had no knowledge or benefit from the second mortgage fund. During this process, we finally received copies of the loan documents from the bank. What we found was infuriating. Sarah had indeed signed an affidavit stating she was divorced and the property was hers exclusively. But the bank's own internal records, which they eventually provided under duress, showed a preliminary title report that clearly listed both our names as joint owner. The loan officer, a man named Mr. Peterson, had evidently ignored this critical discrepancy, or simply hadn't looked closely enough. He had rubber-stamped Sarah's application without proper due diligence. "This is it, Mark," Ken said, his voice grim but confident, pointing to the title report and the signed affidavit. "This is the smoking gun. They had the information. They chose to ignore it. Their negligence is clear. We have a strong case." The legal proceedings dragged on. Every court filing, every deposition, every phone call from Ken was a reminder of the financial black hole we were in. Attorney fees were mounting, even with Ken's reasonable rates. I was dipping into what little savings we had left in our main account. Beyond the legal fight, the emotional toll was immense. My marriage was in tatters. Sarah continued therapy, but the weight of her actions seemed to crush her. She was a shell of her former self. The children were more withdrawn. Their innocent world had been shattered, and I knew it was partly my fault, for not seeing the signs, for trusting too completely. One evening I found myself sitting on the porch swing, staring at the perfectly manicured lawn, the swing set in the backyard, the lights of our home glowing softly. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had built. And it was all on the line. The thought of losing it was a constant ache. I realized that even if we won the lawsuit against the bank, even if the lien was removed from my half of the property, the financial damage Sarah had inflicted was permanent. $400,000 was gone. Our retirement, our kids' college. I would have to work for decades more clawing back from zero. And what about Sarah? Could I ever forgive her? Could we ever rebuild? The betrayal was so deep, so profound, it felt like an amputation. The person I had known, the life we had shared, was gone. This wasn't just a financial crisis. It was the complete implosion of my personal world. And the despair, a cold, heavy blanket, settled over me, threatening to suffocate me entirely. The legal battle was a slow, grinding process. But the injunction against foreclosure gave us a crucial breathing room. Still, the financial reality was grim. We were bleeding money from attorney fees, and the remaining balance in our checking account was dwindling fast. I knew I couldn't just rely on the lawsuit. I had to take desperate measures to secure our future, or at least mitigate the damage. My first thought was to sell something. Our cars? We had two, both paid off. Selling one would free up some cash, but then how would Sarah get around with the kids? It felt like cutting off a limb to save the body. They were comfortable, but not well. Asking them for money felt like admitting complete failure, a deep shame. I had always been independent, but if it meant saving the house, saving my children's stability, I would swallow my pride. I hadn't told them the full extent of the problem yet, just that Sarah was going through a tough time and we were dealing with some financial issues. The truth would crush them. I decided to try a different approach first. I started working more hours, picking up every overtime shift I could at my job. It was exhausting, but every extra dollar felt like a tiny drop in a vast ocean. I also looked into side hustle, delivering food, freelance work online, anything that could bring in some extra income. It was humiliating, but necessary. The tension at home remained high. Sarah was still going to therapy, but her progress seemed slow. She was deeply depressed, plagued by guilt. She tried to make amends by doing more around the house, cooking, cleaning, trying to lighten my load. But her efforts felt hollow. The void between us was too vast. One evening, she found me hunched over the kitchen table, staring at a spreadsheet of our dwindling finances. "Mark," she said softly, "I've been thinking. Maybe I should sell my engagement ring and my wedding band. They're worth something, right? It could help with the legal fees." I looked up surprised. The rings were beautiful, heirlooms on her side, passed down from her grandmother. They were symbolic of our marriage, a marriage that was now irrevocably shattered. "How much do you think they're worth?" I asked, my voice flat. She shrugged. It was a small amount in the face of hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it was something. It was also an acknowledgement of the brokenness of our vows. "Okay," I said, "do it. Every bit helps." The next day she returned with a few $1,000s. It wasn't much, but it helped cover a portion of Ken's latest bill. It felt like tearing off a bandage. Painful but necessary. The depositions for our lawsuit against the bank continued. The bank's lawyers were aggressive, trying to paint me as an absentee husband who didn't care about his finances, implying I should have known what Sarah was doing. They questioned why I didn't notice the money missing from our savings sooner. I trusted my wife, I stated plainly, my voice unwavering. She managed the daily finances. I worked. We had a system that had worked for 15 years. I had no reason to suspect she was secretly draining our accounts and taking out fraudulent loans. Ken was excellent at defending me, pushing back against their insinuation. He presented evidence of my consistent income, my contributions to our joint accounts, my involvement in major financial decisions, like the original mortgage. He demonstrated that my trust was reasonable, and their negligence was the true issue. One of the more frustrating aspects was the bank's insistence that they couldn't be expected to verify every detail. They claimed they relied on the honesty of the applicant. But Ken countered. With banking regulations and industry standards that clearly mandated proper verification of ownership for secured loans. This wasn't a simple personal loan, Your Honor. Ken argued during one of the preliminary hearings. This was a $250,000 loan, secured by a primary residence. To not verify the marital status or sole ownership claim of a borrower, especially when a joint title report was in their possession, is not just a lapse, it's a systemic failure. My client's property is in jeopardy because of their gross negligence. The judge seemed to be listening. The legal wheels were turning, slowly, but they were turning. Children, seeing the strain, started asking more direct questions. "Are we going to have to move?" my son asked one night, his voice small and worried. My heart shattered all over again. I pulled him into a tight hug. "No, buddy. We're fighting to keep our house. Everything's going to be okay." It was a lie, of course. I didn't know if everything would be okay. But I had to protect their innocence for as long as I could. I even considered reaching out to a few friends, but the shame was too overwhelming. How do you tell people your wife secretly gambled away your entire life savings and put your house in jeopardy? It felt like admitting a deeply personal, humiliating failure. The pressure mounted. I started having vivid nightmares. Dreams of our house being torn down, of bailiffs serving eviction notices, of my children crying. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the despair suffocating me. One day Sarah came to me with a brochure for a local gambling addiction support group. "I am going to my first meeting tonight," she said, her voice small but determined. I think I need more than just therapy. I need to be around people who understand." It was a small step, but it was a step. A glimmer of hope, not for our marriage, which felt beyond repair, but for her recovery. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her way out of this darkness. But the house was still the immediate problem. The lawsuit was ongoing, but the outcome was uncertain. The thought of losing everything still haunted me, a persistent shadow. I was running on fumes, emotionally and financially. My only option was to keep fighting, keep working, keep pushing. Even as the despair threatened to consume me, my kids were my anchor. I couldn't give up. Months turned into almost a year. The lawsuit against First National Savings and Loan progressed with the agonizing slowness of the legal system. Depositions were done, documents exchanged, motions argued. Ken was confident, but legal outcomes are never certain. The bank, despite the damning evidence of their negligence, was still fighting hard. They had deep pockets and an army of lawyers. The injunction kept the foreclosure at bay, but the cloud of uncertainty hung over us, heavy and persistent. Every bill from Ken was a fresh stab. My overtime hours and side hustles barely covered them, and our remaining savings were long gone. We were living paycheck to paycheck, cutting every non-essential expense. Sarah continued with her therapy and attended gambling addiction support meetings regularly. Slowly, incrementally, I saw small changes in her. She was less withdrawn, more engaged. She started talking about her feelings, her shame, her desire to make amends, though she knew it might be impossible. She even got a part-time job, something she hadn't done since the kids were toddlers, to contribute, however minimally. It was a sign of genuine effort, but the financial hole was too deep for her wages to make a dent. One day, Ken called with significant news. "Mark, the bank wants to talk settlement." My heart leaped. Really? What are they offering? They're proposing to reduce the principal balance by half to $100,000 and waive all accrued interest and penalties. They would then refinance the loan as a joint mortgage, with both your names on it at a lower interest rate. If you agree to that, they'll drop their claims against you and release the original lien. In return, you drop your lawsuit against them, $100,000. Still a massive sum, but half of the original debt. And they wanted me to take responsibility for it, sign on to the loan. What's your take, Ken? I asked, torn. It's a strong offer, considering the circumstances. It avoids a protracted and expensive trial, which we could still lose. It gets the bank off your back with the foreclosure threat. And it establishes a clear path forward for the debt. You would be taking on liability, yes, but it's a manageable amount compared to the original. And if we went to trial, even if we won on the negligence claim, the judge might still rule that your property is subject to a portion of the original lien. It's a compromise. The thought of taking on $100,000 of debt, a debt that was entirely Sarah's fault, churned my stomach. But the alternative was a never-ending legal battle with an uncertain outcome, possibly losing the house entirely or going bankrupt. What about Sarah? I asked. Is she expected to contribute? Legally, if you both sign the new mortgage, you are both responsible. But practically, it's a question for you two to sort out. I told Ken I needed time to think, to talk to Sarah. That night I sat down with Sarah. The settlement offer spread between us. I explained Ken's analysis. So you'd be taking on my debt, Mark, she said, her voice choked with emotion. $100,000 of my mistake. Why would you do that? 'Cause it's the only way to save the house, Sarah, I replied, my voice weary. It's the best way to secure a home for our kids. If we don't, we risk losing everything. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and profound sorrow. I don't know how I can ever make it up to you. You can start by staying clean, I said, looking at her directly. By continuing your recovery. By being the mother our children deserve. That's all I can ask. The decision was agonizing but clear. I called Ken and told him to accept the settlement offer. It was a bitter pill to swallow, shouldering a debt that wasn't mine, but it was a pragmatic decision to protect my family. A few weeks later, we stood in the bank's office, a different, smaller branch this time, to sign the new loan documents. It was surreal. The same bank that had sent the default notice, the same bank I had sued, was now processing a new loan. Mr. Harrison was not there. Instead, a young, polite loan officer handled the paperwork. As I signed my name next to Sarah's, a cold finality settled over me. This was it. The official acceptance of a burden I never asked for. But it was also the turning of a page, a step towards a new, albeit difficult, future. The house was safe for now. After the paperwork was done, we walked out of the bank in silence. The air was crisp, the sun bright. Mark, Sarah began, her voice hesitant. What does this mean for us? For our marriage? I stopped walking, looking at the street, at the cars passing by, at the ordinary world that somehow continued to exist despite the earthquake in my life. I had thought about this endlessly. My heart was broken. The trust was gone. The betrayal had fractured us beyond repair. Sarah, I said, turning to face her, my voice quiet but firm. I don't know if we can ever go back. I'm taking on this debt for our kids, to keep a roof over their heads. But the person I married, the life we built, it was all based on a lie. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, not like before. I think we need to separate. Her face crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't make a sound. She just nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She knew. She had probably known all along. The words felt like a physical wrenching, tearing something vital from my core. It was the hardest thing I had ever said, but it was the truth. The reckoning was here, not just with the bank, but with our marriage. It was over. The house was saved, but our life together as I knew it was not. The heartbreak was complete. The separation was as quiet and painful as everything else that had transpired. Sarah moved into a small apartment across town, near her sister's place. We told the kids that Mommy and Daddy needed some time apart, that we were still a family, just living in 2 houses. They were sad, confused, but remarkably resilient. I made sure to emphasize that it wasn't their fault, that sometimes grown-ups just had to figure things out. The house, our house, still felt like a hollow shell. The weight of the $100,000 second mortgage settled heavily on my shoulders, a constant, tangible reminder of Sarah's betrayal. I had taken on the debt, essentially buying back my peace of mind and my children's stability. It felt like a monument to my broken heart. Life became a routine of work, childcare, and relentless budgeting. Every extra dollar went towards paying down the new mortgage. I sold one of our cars, something I had resisted earlier, now a necessary sacrifice. I cut down on groceries, entertainment, anything that wasn't absolutely essential. My side hustles became a permanent fixture of my evenings. It was exhausting, but I was determined to climb out of this financial pit. Sarah continued with her recovery. She was dedicated to her support group and therapy. She visited the kids regularly, and I made sure they had quality time together. Our interactions were polite, distant, carefully neutral. We were co-parenting, nothing more. The emotional scars were too deep, the trust too broken for anything else. One evening, about 6 months after the separation, Sarah called me. Her voice was stronger than I had heard it in a long time. "Mark, I wanted to tell you something. I just hit my 1-year sobriety chip from gambling. It's been hard, really hard, but I am doing it. And I am still working, saving every penny. I want to start paying you back for the mortgage." My chest tightened. A year. It was a huge milestone for her. "That's great, Sarah. Really great. I know it won't make up for everything," she continued, her voice softening. "But I want to try. I want to show you, and myself, that I can be responsible again." It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the gesture, the effort. I knew she couldn't pay me back for the $400,000. Not fully, not ever. But her willingness to try, to acknowledge her responsibility, was a step towards healing. Not for us, but for her. And perhaps, for the sake of our children, a path towards a more peaceful coexistence. "Just focus on your recovery, Sarah," I said. "Genuinely. And keep being there for the kids. That's what matters most right now." The legal chapter of our story was mostly closed. The lawsuit against the bank was dismissed after the settlement. I hadn't come out unscathed. I was left with a significant debt, a mountain of financial rebuilding ahead, and a shattered marriage. But I had kept the house. I had fought for my children's home, and I had won that battle. I learned many harsh lessons. The most profound was about trust, and the devastating consequences when it's betrayed. I learned that, even in the closest relationships, people can harbor secrets that can shatter lives. I learned about addiction, its insidious grip, and its capacity to destroy everything in its path. My view of the world, and of human nature, had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the naive, trusting man who believed his life was perfect. I was scarred, cynical in some ways, but also stronger. I had faced down a financial apocalypse and emerged battered but still standing. The house no longer felt like a symbol of betrayal. It was now a symbol of my resilience, a testament to what I was willing to fight for. It was still my home, and more importantly, it was still my children's home. Life moved on. The kids slowly adjusted to their new reality. They spent weekends with Sarah, and weekdays with me. I learned to cook, to manage the household on my own, to balance work and parenting. It was hard, but I was doing it. Sometimes late at night, I would sit on the porch swing, the same one I had sat on the day the bank letter arrived, and think about everything. The good years, the lies, the despair, the fight. And I would look up at the stars and feel a quiet sense of triumph. I had lost a wife, a fortune, and a piece of my innocence. But I had saved what truly mattered, my children's home and my own resolve. It wasn't a happy ending in the storybook sense. There was no magical reconciliation, no sudden return to the perfect life. It was a new reality, one shaped by heartbreak and resilience. The scar remained, a permanent reminder of the deep wound. But it was a scar that had healed, and beneath it a stronger, wiser person had emerged. I was still standing, and that was enough.